And we should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you guys are indeed in the chat. Let me know if you can hear me properly in the chat. We've got about 10 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Welcome Marilyn, and welcome everyone that I've seen in the chat. Hi Linda. Let us know if you can hear me properly. Hi honey, and welcome everyone. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me. Thank you Tish. Hi Trish. Right, welcome everyone. If any of you were completely new to me, if you've just clicked on this video and you don't know what's happening, this is a live stream from London. It is nearly 8 p.m. UK time in London, September 20th, 2025. So if it's no longer September the 20th for you, you're probably watching the replay in the next few weeks or months or years, whenever that might be. Hi Joe, and welcome everyone that just joined. So most of you know the drill already. I'm gonna have to test the microphone. So what I'll do is I'll tap the microphone 3 times. You let me know whether you've heard the tapping. You should be able to hear the tap. And welcome William. Ashas, and welcome everyone that just joined. Let me know in the chat whether you've heard that little triple tap, because my microphone has 3 different connections that could go wrong, and it's very windy today, so I don't want the connections to get loose because I don't want you to hear the wind. Hi Sandrine, you've heard the tap, perfect. It's not too windy right here, but a minute ago I was waiting for you just there, and I was actually trying to put some I noticed my eye was really red, so I was trying to put some drops, but the drops kept flying away, so that's why I had to move here. Every time I tried to drop a drop, the drop would fly away in my hair instead, so I moved on here. It's gonna be interesting when I try to stand up, because I'm actually sat on I don't know if you can see, it's like a giant beach chair, but although it's fairly low, my feet are not touching the floor, so it's gonna be interesting when I try to gracefully stand up. But we still have a few minutes before that anyway. We've got 8 minutes. You don't hear any wind. Perfect. Thank you, Sandy. Right. So we've got about 8 minutes. If any of you were completely new to me, of course, do say hello in the chat. It's always nice to see a few new names. Nice to have you along, Sandrine. And welcome Laurie, nice to see you here. See, the sign is there to welcome you. I think it must have been the first day of the, that's the London School of Economics behind me. So that's probably the beginning of the student year, so that's why they have those big welcome signs everywhere. Hi Nikki, nice to see you here. And welcome Lynn from Chicago. So we've got, let me check, 7 minutes to go. So if any of you were completely new to me, if you're watching the live, you've got a chat. Feel free to use it. You can interact with us and you can ask me any questions you might have. I might see them or I might not. Sometimes it goes a bit too quick for me. And if you're watching the replay in the next few weeks or months, if you wanted to enjoy the chat, you should be able to find the chat under the video. You should be able to open the chat replay. You don't have to, but sometimes if you hear me say something a bit random, it could be that I'm reacting to something that happened in the chat. Most of the time I try to repeat what's in the chat because I know that a lot of people watch those lives later on, you know. But sometimes I might not. Sometimes I might just react. And if you don't have the chat, you might be like, what is she reacting to? So just so you know, it's always an option to open the chat. Right, let's see what time it is. 6 minutes. You know what? I'm already gonna try to gracefully stand up because it might take a while. Right. because I've got only one hand, you know, one is holding the gimbal. Hi Jenny, nice to see you here. Right, bear with me. Yeah, I've made it. Ooh. Let me, I'm gonna flip the camera around to show you where I was sat. So that's the London School of Economics. And that was my lovely beach chair. See, I said it right. Beach chair. I know how to do the long E's now. You need to smile as you say it. Like sheep, you smile. Like sheep, sheep. Beach, beach. If you smile, it's a long E. Shit, shit. You see? I'm improving. So we've got about, I would say about 4 minutes to go now. 5. And we're gonna have to go and brave the wind. I think it's because of those buildings behind me. They're quite high, so they've been channeling the wind right into us. It might not be that bad anywhere else. So we still have 5 minutes to go. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be new. Or you could also let us know in the comment after the live as well. Let me flip this camera around again to show you where we are. I'm sure some of you recognize it. We've been around here before. We've done this walk before, but it's been a while. I think we've been here only once since I've moved across to YouTube from Hego. So we've been here only once in the last 2 years, really. If any of you are joining now and you're like, what's happening? Nothing quite yet. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. And then we'll get started in a few minutes. We'll wait until it's officially 8. To the beach. I wish. I think it's the end of the season. It's not really warm enough in the UK to go for a swim nowadays. Which is a shame because I've got my first days off coming. I've not had a day off since June 24th. That's when I was in France for my sister's wedding. I've got 2 days off coming up next weekend, but it's not as warm as it was. Lovely little bookshop down here. Right, let's see what time it is. 2 minutes to go. So we've got 2 minutes before to officially get started. Yes, browsing menswear for the time being. Or student wear, maybe. Because I think that's the LSE shop. So that's student outfits. Right, let's see if it is time. Oops, sorry. 2 minutes. So we're going for a live walk around Holborn area. And the British Museum on Lincoln's Field and all that. And good evening, Lee. Nice to see you here. Welcome, right on time because we're starting in 1 minute. It's the final countdown. Hi Denise, nice to see you here. One minute, and Mike is here as well. Welcome, Mike. Nice to see so many of you. And welcome, Rosemary. Good afternoon. or good evening for us, or good morning for some of you. And it might be time. No, still 1 minute. Don't know why my eye is very red. It's probably the wind. Probably should wear some glasses when I cycle, because little debris keep flying in otherwise. And it is officially time to start. So welcome everyone. Welcome to London. It is 8 p.m. UK time, and that's time to flip the camera around and go for a little walk. So for the ones that don't know me, I'm Natalie, and I'll take you for a little walk, and I'll tell you about stuff that interests me, which is mainly dark stuff. Now, before we go much further, this is the old curiosity shop. It is a bit of a fraud, really. I mean, it is an old shop. It dates back to at least the 16th century. It's a beautiful little shop, and it definitely is one of the oldest in London, and it survived the Great Fire of London and all that. But the link to Dickens is very, very much debatable. The Dickens novel was published in I think it's 1841. They started, they were publishing chapter by chapter in the press, but 1841, and the sign on the shop only appeared in the 1860s. It was the shop owner, his name was Barnabas. He decided to write that on his little shop for a bit of promotion, a bit of publicity, really. And it's not only until the 1880s that an American gentleman came to London and he spotted the shop and he wrote about it, so he made it famous in America. Actually, back in the day, immortalized, it was spelled with a Z, so that was a bit of an Americanism. They've corrected it now. But yeah, his connection to Charles Dickens Dickens would have seen it, it would have been there, but there's absolutely nothing to prove that he would have been inspired by the shop when he wrote the story of Nell and her grandfather. Now we've got a lovely little barber sign as well. As we mentioned before, those little signs, they were inspired by the dirty bandages and stuff and fabric that were full of blood outside of the barber shops, because the barbers, they used to do minor surgery. And anyway, talking about surgery, let's go towards the Royal College of Surgeons. So the Royal College of Surgeons, it's a beautiful building. Well, actually, at the time of King Henry VIII, it used to be called the Royal College of Barber and Surgeons, because the barbers would do a little bit of minor surgeries. Hold on, I think the square is still open. Let's see. It's probably going to be way too dark, but there's a bust of John Hunter. I'm afraid we're going to get locked in if we go in. It's going to be too dark anyway, you won't see anything. Never mind, ignore me. Because there's a little bust of John Hunter in there I could have shown you, but it's going to be way too dark. You won't see John anyway. And also, we might get locked in, because usually they close at dusk. I don't know why they're still open. Anyway, this beautiful building, it's the Royal College of Surgeons. So the surgeons, back in the day, they were very much involved with the body snatchers. For most of you have followed a lot of my tours before. We talked about the body snatchers. They were those people that would go to the graveyards or the cemeteries to steal the newly buried bodies, to sell them to the surgeons and the anatomists. Because at the time, the only bodies that were given to science were the bodies from the executions. There were some, but not enough. And the executions, they were only a few times a year, and very often they'll hang a few people at the same time. So then you would have weeks with no bodies. And to give you an idea, at the time, one surgeon, one student to graduate would need at least 3 bodies to dissect over the course of his teaching. So there was a massive demand for human bodies. Now, the body snatchers, they might go into the graveyards to steal those bodies. We talked about them before, but I don't want you to get a picture of them like criminals working alone at dark. No, it was very much organized crime and very much needed as well, because the surgeons would literally organize it with them, you know. Those body snatchers, sometimes they would even get a bit of holiday pay. Because for the summertime, there was no need for bodies because the students were out of school anyway, and also because in the summer the bodies didn't preserve for very long anyway. So apparently some of the best body snatchers were sometimes given a bit of money by the surgeons. And apparently even some of them, it was agreed that if they went to prison for their crimes, the surgeons would actually give a bit of money for their families to survive through the prison time. So it was very much organized with the surgeons. And taking the bodies from the graveyards were not the only way to collect the bodies. There was another technique. Sometimes they'll hire some of those mourning ladies. Those mourning ladies, they were those ladies that were paid to follow the coffin through the funerals, and they were paid to cry and cry and cry for a dead that they had never met. So sometimes they would hire one of those ladies and they would send them to the workhouse. You know, when they heard that someone died in the workhouse. The workhouses, again, for those of you that don't know, they were those accommodations for the very poor. So the mourning lady would knock at the door of the workhouse and she'd be like, I hear that my great-granddad died yesterday at the workhouse. And the attendant would be like, oh, I'm ever so sorry, what's his name? And they'll be like, oh, would you be able to repeat that? And then the attendant might be like, oh, did you say James Donovan? Oh yes, I'm afraid he's passed away yesterday. When can you collect the body? It was as simple as that, because otherwise the workhouses, they would have to pay for the cost of the funerals anyway. So sometimes some bodies were acquired by different means, not only body snatching. Now, it is also the site of a very interesting museum, the Hunterian Museum. It is mainly the collection of John Hunter. John Hunter, he was the brother of William Hunter. He was a very famous and infamous surgeon. It is a lovely little museum, not for the faint-hearted. Let me show you some of the type of exhibits you can see inside. Hunter was studying the blood system, and he was actually studying the pregnant ladies a lot. He actually proved that the blood system of the baby was not the same as the one of the mother. He was actually accused, probably wrongly, but he was actually accused of, maybe even killing some pregnant ladies to be able to study their bodies. It is a bit far-fetched, but you know, pregnant ladies, luckily, they were hardly ever executed. Unless it was an accident, you know, they didn't know. So those bodies were very valuable. And John Hunter was, in terms of his study, he was a brilliant man. He's the first one that produced, that managed an artificial insemination in the 18th century, would you believe? And that was successful. So very interesting doctor. And so a lot of his collection is exposed inside. It's the largest collection of anatomical specimens. There's another Hunterian museum in Glasgow, in Scotland, but that's mainly the collection of his brother William. And Hunter was also, well, he was a man of science, and he was ready to do whatever he had to do to acquire the bodies he wanted to study. There's a famous example, the case of Charles Byrnes. He was a giant. We don't know exactly how tall, but we think at least 7'7". He was from Ireland originally. He probably suffered from a condition called acromegaly. It's too much growth hormones. Anyway, Charles Byrne, the giant, he knew as he was alive that John Hunter was going to want his body after his death. And poor Charles, he didn't want to. He wanted to be buried, you know, like anybody else. But he knew very well that if he was indeed buried, the body snatchers would come and steal his body straight away. So what he had done as his health deteriorated, he decided to organize his own funeral. He organized that his body would be taken to Margate, where a little fisherman would take him away and drop him at sea, so no one could steal the body. The thing is, bless him, as he died, he was betrayed by one of his mates. One of his mates actually was paid to give John Hunter the location of the body, sorry, before he could be taken to Margate. So his body was stolen, and oh, you had a friend that was 7'7". Wow. I have a friend that's 6'8", and that's already huge. When I was queuing with him or stuff like that, people would take pictures in our back, you know, to show the contrast between him and me. So 7'7", that's huge. Anyway, so yeah, poor John. His body was taken, was dissected, his bones were boiled, and his skeleton was exposed in the museum until not long ago, until 2020 actually. There was even a petition at some point. People could vote whether they thought he should be exposed, or whether he should be buried or buried at sea as he would have wanted. The museum was closed for COVID, and it reopened fairly recently. They've finally taken the decision not to expose him anymore. But they've not agreed to get rid of the body and bury him. So, I mean, my views is that if you're gonna keep the bones anyway, you might as well expose them. It would be nice if finally we could bury him, you know, as he would have wanted originally. But hey ho. John Hunter was a very interesting character. To give you an idea, he was also studying syphilis, and he was actually wrongly convinced that syphilis and gonorrhea were the same disease. And he was a very influential character, you know. Apparently, he was so famous that the Bishop of Durham, he decided that after his death, he would donate his rectum to the collection. So apparently, they've got the rectum of the Bishop of Durham. Anyway, John Hunter, he was studying syphilis and gonorrhea, and in his study, he decided to inject a third party with the diseases to check, and he did not state who was the third party, but some people believe that it was himself. So would you believe he was willing to inject himself, or not really an injection, but I think he just took the pus from someone with gonorrhea and put it on his own genitals, really. So, you know, he was a man of science, so much so that he was ready to contaminate himself with diseases to study them. And he actually messed up because the samples might have been contaminated or something. The study was not very successful, but he did many very successful studies. Anyway, we are on Lincoln's Inn Square. It's, I think it's the largest square in London, actually. And on this site somewhere, not this very building, but somewhere on this site, it is said that Nell Gwyn might have lived. Nell Gwyn, some of you might remember her. We talked about her in quite a few of my tours. That's, of course, Charles II, famous mistress, one of the many mistresses, pretty witty Nell. Her mother was a brothel owner. So her mother had a brothel in Covent Garden, and when she was young, at some point, she lived somewhere around this site. I say when she was young, she met Charles when she was very young herself. She probably was about 17 years old when she met Charles. And Charles was about 20 years her senior anyway. They went to the theater a lot, you know. At the time, people would go to the theater to see the plays, but also to see the king flirting with those girls. It was like the reality TV of the day, you know. And Charles was of course, a man that was always surrounded by quite a few ladies. But I think Nell is everybody's favorite because she was very funny. There's an occasion apparently where she was coming on a horse carriage around here. You know, she was she had a few competitors in terms of Charles' mistresses. One of them was Louise de Cornouailles, a French lady from Brittany. And people didn't like the French one because, of course, she was a Catholic. And apparently there's one day when she was on a horse carriage coming down here, when she was surrounded by a mob of people shouting at her like hitting the doors of the carriage. And apparently she opened the door because they probably believed it was the French one, the Catholic one. So she opened the door and she said, "Oh, you mistaken, my dear people. I'm the Protestant whore." And on another occasion, apparently Charles came to visit his little son that he had with Nell. You know, he had quite a few illegitimate children, 18 we believe. And at one point the little toddler runs away. And in front of Charles, Nell goes, "Come here, you little bastard." The king was shocked. He was like, "How dare you call him a bastard?" And Nell went, "Well, I'm afraid that's exactly what he is. As far as I'm aware, you've not given him any titles yet. So he's a bastard." And that's how Charles II created the Dukedom of St. Albans. So that's a title that still exists today. Anyway, there's not much to see, but let me show you anyway. It's going to be a bit dark. But on this side, that's where a Prime Minister used to live, Spencer Perceval. Spencer Perceval, he was a lawyer originally. He was a very decent lawyer, actually. That's why he lived here, because we are on Lincoln's Inn Field. That's one of those 4 Inns of Court. And he was a MP, a Tory MP, and Prime Minister then. He's the only Prime Minister in the country that was murdered. What happened is he was one day in the lobby of the House of Commons when there's a little man. So the Prime Minister was wearing a blue coat, and there's a little man that came, a guy from Liverpool, that was wearing a brown coat. It's very important, the colors of the coats. And he basically gunned down the Prime Minister. It's a long story, but he basically blamed the politicians because he had been, I think he had been locked up in Russia and he wanted some compensation, and he blamed the Prime Minister for the failure of his business. So whatever, long story, but the Prime Minister was killed. It's not really the murder itself that interests me. What happened is that there was a young man in Red Church in Cornwall that had a dream weeks prior to the event. He had seen a dream in some kind of like a great hall or a great big room where he saw a little guy with a brown coat getting a gun out and shooting a little guy with a blue coat. And he asked, "Who's that?" And they said, it's Spencer Perceval, the Prime Minister. And he had this dream several times, so much so that he wanted to jump on his horse and run to London to let them know at Parliament to prevent it. But his friends were like, "No, you can't do that, you can't. They'll think you are plotting, they'll think you're mad, they'll hang you." So the little guy never did. And of course, when finally the Prime Minister was indeed murdered, exactly how it happened in his premonition dream, he felt ever so sorry. So that's an interesting case of premonition, you know. And it is said that, that's not really documented or proven, but some people say that Spencer Perceval himself had some dreams about his own murder or assassination. So interesting. Anyway, it's going to be a bit dark, but can you see there's a little blue plaque there on the wall? That is for another surgeon called William Marsden. I'm quite glad he's here because, you know, we talk a lot about body snatchers and all this repulsive trade. So I don't want to give you a bad image of the surgeons, you know. When I go for surgery today, luckily it's not very often, but when I do go, I'm very happy that the surgeons have the knowledge that they have. And if it wasn't for all those stolen bodies over the years, well, medicine probably wouldn't have evolved as it did. Anyway, William Marsden was a surgeon in Victorian times, and you know, at the time medicine was not free. You know, you'd have some very basic infirmaries in the workhouses and stuff, but really a lot of people couldn't afford to go and see a doctor and stuff. And one day William was walking around here when he spotted a little girl in front of a church that was dying of starvation. He, you know, at the time you couldn't just go and be admitted into hospital, you know. I mean, so he did that for her, but he couldn't actually save her. She passed away, and that's when he decided to create the Royal Marsden Hospital and the Royal Free Hospital. The Royal Marsden Hospital, they still exist today. They're very well known for their cancer research. And so he's basically a bit of a precursor of the NHS, really. So thank you, William Marsden. Some of you might remember, we mentioned him before because he's buried at West Norwood Cemetery. Although we might have not been all the way to see his grave, but we've been there together in some of my live streams. Now let's move on to something a little bit more fun. Let's go and see a pub. This beautiful pub right in the middle of your screen now. It is known as the Ship. The Ship. When you see a proper old pub that is called the Ship, very often, it's not the case here, but very often you can bet that before the Reformation, you know, with King Henry VIII, when he changed the religion of the country, they might have been called the Ark. Before the Reformation, a lot of pubs, they had very Catholic names, the St. Peter's or the Ark or whatever. And after the Reformation, very often those pub owners, they changed the name of the pubs to please the king. So they might call them the Ark might become the Ship, or the St. Peter's might become the Duke of this or the Duke of that. Anyway, here it's not the case because this pub was literally built at the time of the Reformation, 1549 to be precise, and rebuilt in the 20th century. But it is a lovely little pub, and it is allegedly haunted by a happy ghost. What happened is, it is said that in this pub they were doing some illegal masses. You know, when Henry VIII changed the religion of the country to the Church of England, the Catholic masses were illegal. You were not allowed to go to Catholic church or to have a Catholic mass. And very often they did that illegally in pubs. So you'd have the lookout, you'd have some of the king's, some of the Catholics were hiding at the street corners, and they were looking for the king's official. And if they spotted the king's official, if they spotted the king's official, they'll run back down to the pub, and they'll tell people, they're coming, and then they'll hide the priest in a little hidey hole. There were those little kind of boxes where they could hide the priest. And apparently in this pub, they were never ever caught. Some say it might be why they've got the happy ghost. Right, it looks like there's a bit of a celebration here. Let me go through. Don't want to be filming people. This is a Polish bar. I have no idea what they're celebrating tonight. There are quite a few parties tonight. You'll see we're going towards Red Lion Square in a moment. Today it is the National Day in Chile, apparently, because they had a Chilean party in the square. You might see in a moment. It's probably still running. So, well, I guess it is Saturday night. I often do my tours on. Let's cross because it's green. I often do my tours on a Sunday, so it's a bit quieter on the streets. But today it is Saturday, 8:30, so it is busy. Now should I go? No, I shouldn't, but let's go anyway. Let me show you this beautiful building. Laurie wanted to see it. So this is the Rosewood Hotel. Beautiful hotel. They have, it used to be an insurance company, and they have, apparently it's the only hotel in the world where they have a suite. The suite is called the Manor House Suite. The suite itself has its own postcode. Interesting. But to be honest, it's fairly easy in the UK to have your own postcode, because the postcodes are very, very precise. Buckingham Palace also has its own postcode. In many other countries, the postcode would be the full town or the full district. When over here, when you have a postcode, it's very precise. It's literally just a third of your street. But anyway, right. Before our next stop, it might be a bit busy at the next stop because it's going to be the Chilean party. But before our next stop, I need to tell you a bit more about the Civil War, really. So to keep it simple, what happened with the Civil War, it's that we had a king, Charles I. He was a bit too keen on his divine powers of king. You know, we've not had an absolute monarchy in this country since the signing of the Magna Carta 800 years ago. There's actually been a little exhibit about the Magna Carta in London. It finished yesterday, but I got to see it before it finished. Anyway, so we've not had an absolute monarchy since that. And Charles II, he was a bit too keen on his divine powers of kings. And he annoyed Parliament. He basically dismissed them. They were not happy. They accused him of treason. We had a civil war. No one believed it was going to happen, but they accused him of treason. He was found guilty, and they beheaded him in Whitehall. And they beheaded him. And Oliver Cromwell took the power for about 10 years. So we can say we had a bit of a republic for about 10 years. Now after that, after Cromwell wanted his son to take the power after him, but his son didn't have the same personality. That didn't go down well. And that's when we decided to reinvite Charles II. So we went back to having a constitutional monarchy. Now Charles II, when he came back to his throne, he was shocked to find out that Cromwell and all the other people that had signed the death warrant of his dad, the king, they had been buried. Cromwell had been buried at Westminster Abbey like a king. And for Charles II, that was unacceptable. So he decided to exhume Cromwell and the two other judges that basically signed the death warrants. Well, some people were still alive, they've been hanged, and some people were already dead and buried, like Cromwell and the two judges. So they were exhumed. Their bodies would be taken down to a pub called the Red Lion. We're not gonna go all the way down to the pub. Here is the Chilean party. I can show you a little bit of it, but not too much because of the copyright. So their bodies would be taken down to the pub called the Red Lion. We're not gonna go all the way to the Red Lion because it's not the original, it's moved, but it used to be on this site. And the bodies had a night to spend at the Red Lion, and the next morning they were gonna be hanged, drowned and quartered. So they were already dead, but they were gonna be killed again. And apologies, I've missed quite a lot in the chat, I think. So yeah, those bodies would spend a night in the pub before to be beheaded the day after. Now there's a lot of gossip. It's probably rubbish, but some people believe that some of the parliamentarians would have gone into the pub that night, and they would have swapped those 3 bodies. So Oliver Cromwell and the 2 judges, and they would have swapped them with 3 different bodies that were stolen from the cemetery. It's probably all rubbish, but who knows? And some said that the body of Cromwell and his 2 friends were actually buried in here, in this little square, and it is allegedly haunted. It is said that at night sometimes you see 3 silhouettes walking around the square. It might be Cromwell and his mates, who knows? Anyway, I can't stay too long because of copyright issues in terms of the music. It seems like it's the end of the party anyway, but that was the Chilean National Day. It's amazing in London. We have so many different communities from all across the globe, really. So pretty much any National Day would be celebrated at some point somewhere. Anyway, so we know, well, we don't know for sure what happened to Cromwell's body. Because of course, after spending a night here, he was hanged, drowned and quartered. Apparently, it took 8 blows to sever his head. That's quite a lot for a body that's already dead. We don't really know what they did with the body. Some believe that it might have been buried in Abney, way before it became Abney Park Cemetery, but in that area somewhere. Some believe that it might have been buried in Chiswick Church. I might have told you that story a few weeks ago when we went to Chiswick, and some believe that it was just left in a ditch down there. We just don't know about the body, but we know exactly what happened to his head. So let me tell you about the 300 years of the 300 years story of his head. What happened at first is that they took the head and they put it on a spike on the building of Parliament in Westminster, on the Great Hall, and it was there for many months or even many years, when apparently there was a bit of a storm and the head fell and rolled down on the pavement, where it was picked up by a guard. The guards wanted to, well, he picked it up and he didn't know what to do with it. He took it home. At the time, the king on the throne was Charles II. James II. So that was Charles II's brother. So for him, it was still fairly important. For him, it was still the head of his dad, or the head of the guy that killed his dad, sorry. So Cromwell's head was still very important for him. So he offered, I'm just gonna wait because it's a bit noisy. He offered a reward to whoever would bring the head back. The guard, of course, didn't really have the balls to bring the head back, because then he would have had to admit what he had done with the head, you know. So he never did. And eventually the head ended up in the collection of a little museum. So at the beginning of the 1700s, you could go to the museum and see Cromwell's head. When eventually it was then sold to a guy called Russell. Russell was ironically a cousin of Cromwell. This one is my favorite. I don't know why I've been seeing quite a few street art representing raccoons these days, when we don't have raccoons over here. I've never seen a raccoon in my life. I wish you had exported them like you exported the gray squirrels from America. I wish you could bring me a few raccoons. Anyway, back to Cromwell's head. So the guy Russell, he kept the head with him, and he exposed it at parties. He actually took it out every party, and he actually damaged it a little bit because he was passing it over from hand to hand, and eventually, trash panda. Eventually, that guy sold it to another guy, a jeweler called James Cock. He bought it for a large amount of money, and then he sold it again to 3 men. We are now in Victorian times. Those guys were doing freak shows. You know, at the time, those Victorians, they had those horrible freak shows where they'll use people with disability, or sometimes they would sew half a dead baby with half a fish, and they'll pretend it's a mermaid. I mean, they were doing disgusting stuff, really, but somehow those shows were very very successful. And so those guys, they didn't actually make that much money with Cromwell's head. In Victorian times, people didn't care as much about his head. So the head ended up in the possession of one of those 3 guys' daughter, and she sold it to a family, the Wilkinson family. And the Wilkinson family, they kept it from generation to generations until the 1930s. Let me show you the Wilkinson gentleman with the head. In the 1930s, finally, they decided to run a few tests on the head. And they determined, the scientists determined that it was indeed the right head of Cromwell, because the head had been severed after dying. The skin was still there. It was a bit like leathered, really, and they could still see the wart. Cromwell had a famous wart on his cheek, so they could still see the wart. And the hair color was right as well. So they concluded, there was no DNA at the time, of course, but they concluded that it was indeed the right head. And finally, in the 1960s, they decided to do the most logical thing to do with a dead head. They buried it in a secret location in Sydney Sussex College in Cambridge. So finally, Oliver Cromwell's head can rest in peace. West Norwood, number 78. If I was gonna go home, I'll take the 78. I'm cycling home, but that would be my bus. Yeah, what a mad story. Now let's cross over to show you another little hidden gem here. Bear with me, I'm gonna pop the camera through the railings. Hope I won't make a mess, because my gimbal is getting a bit more sensitive than it used to be. Bear with me, there we go. So this is the Kingsway tunnel. It's a tram's tunnel, because we used to have tramways in London, would you believe? Sorry. Yes, Samantha, they would have done stuff to preserve it in terms of drying and stuff. Sometimes they even put a bit of tar on them to preserve them. They have a head like that at the Tower of London. Not that the public can view it, but they've got it in a drawer. So we know it exists. I mean, we know those heads that are a bit leathered with the type of preservation they did. We know it's completely possible. Now the tunnel. So yeah, we had trams in London. We had, would you believe, the full length of London was covered with tramways. Well, apart from Westminster and Chelsea, because tramways, they were for the poor, and Westminster and Chelsea, they were always a bit too posh for that. But the rest of London was completely mapped with tramways. To tell you a bit more about the history of the tram, In Victorian times, they were already on rails, but they were behind horses, so they would be dragged with horsepower. And eventually, when electricity came along, they decided to get rid of the horses, because the tramway companies, they had to deal with the horse manure and stuff. So electricity was easier. So they decided to have electricity. And let me show you. There's another beautiful piece of street art here. It's from Dan Kitchener. I can zoom in a bit to show you. He often does some amazing views of cities like this, with the London buses and all that. Now, so the the trams were at that point electric, and after the First World War, the metal became very expensive, you know, because we didn't have enough. So suddenly they decided to get rid of the tracks. So there were kind of like buses being dragged with electricity. And then after that, we had the routmasters, you know, in the 50s, when they had the routmasters and stuff. They got completely rid of the tracks and of the trams. So we don't have trams anywhere in London now, apart from some new trams in Croydon in South London. They keep talking about maybe bringing the trams back one day, but so far it's not happening. All right, hold on, let's see, Laurie. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, we don't have any hard evidence that it was indeed his head. And, you know, as we mentioned earlier, the bodies might have been swapped anyway at the pub. But for me, the wart, it's quite, you know, because if they had stolen a body, or even if they had taken a random head that was well preserved and stuff, to have the random wart on his cheek, that's quite unusual. The wart, you even see it on his portraits, you know. Most people, when they had a portrait done by an artist, they would tell them not to reproduce the warts or the imperfections. Cromwell didn't give a crap. He wanted his wart on the portrait. So you can actually see it on his portrait, his big fat wart on his cheek. Oh, thank you, Linda, that's very nice of you. If any of you drop me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee as well, it's very, very much appreciated. It's really thanks to your generosity that I can keep running those tours. Right. Let's cross whenever we can. I'll tell you about another interesting gentleman that used to live right here across the street. It is Sir Hans Sloane. Sloane was a physician. He was from Ireland originally, and he was known to collect the world. He would collect anything, fossils, plants, beans, rocks, whatever it might be, books as well. He was a very famous physician. He actually was the physician of a few kings, but he was appointed as the physician of the governor of Jamaica. And so we are in the 18th century. And he followed him in Jamaica. And once in Jamaica, the governor actually died quite quickly, which was a bit of a shame for such a famous doctor. But Hans Sloane, he loved it in Jamaica. At the time, it was a big trip. You know, his friends were like, "No, don't go, don't go." And once he was there, his friends were like, "Oh, well, if you do go anyway, bring me a few samples of this and a few samples of that." So once he was in Jamaica, he studied the plants. And he spent a lot of time with the enslaved people. You know, a lot of the enslaved people, they'd come from Ghana or Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, you might say. And they would know cacao very well. So cacao had been brought to Jamaica by the Spaniard, and there he is. So that's where he used to live. And he actually, so the cacao drink on its own was very bitter, but some people used to mix it with milk. It is said that Sloane brought back the recipe and he sold it to Cadbury. Now he really did, that is true, but he didn't really invent it. There are some evidence that there were already people drinking cacao with milk in the UK as well, not only in Jamaica, so it's very windy now. Not only in Jamaica, but in the UK as well. So he did not really invent it, but he's definitely the one that popularized it. I hope you can hear me well despite the wind. It's very windy in this street. A bit better now. So yeah, he's famous for having invented, again, he didn't really invent it, but for having popularized hot chocolate. And he's also famous for being the origin of the British Museum. What happened is his collection was huge. Already when he was alive, so he lived here, but he had to buy the house next door to house his collection because it was so big. And eventually he had a place in Chelsea where he would invite his friends to see his collection. He's got, he had a medicinal plant garden in Chelsea that's still there today. You can still visit that today. And he, as his health deteriorated, he kind of wanted to donate his collection to the nation. He didn't really donate it. They did pay, but they paid for the upkeeping and the creating of a gallery and all that. So his collection was left to the nation. Now then they had to find a building. Would you believe at first, before to get a building here, they looked at a building quite close to St. James's Palace, a large building that was built with yellow Bath stone that used to belong to the Duke of Buckingham. It was known as Buckingham House. I'm talking about Buckingham Palace. So things could have been different. The government could have bought Buckingham Palace, and Buckingham Palace could have been at the British Museum. So you see, London could have been a completely different place. Anyway, so eventually the British Museum ended up in a location here. When you go into the British Museum today, you still have a room that's mainly Sloane's collection. Now, Hans Sloane, he did not build this collection. People used to say he was collecting the world. He did not build this collection or buy all those items on the salary of a physician. He also had a lot of money coming in from slavery. His wife was in the plantation business, and he had some shares in the slavery as well. So he to an extent, you know, it's not rare for a gentleman of his time, but yeah, slavery money went into the acquisition of all those items. Which is quite interesting because so his collection was actually divided. Some of it ended up at the National History Museum. Some of it is now at the the British Library, and a lot of it is here. The British Library, they actually kind of exposed their link to slavery when the British Museum kind of shies away from it, if you ask me. But anyway, this is the British Museum to my right. We'll go and I'll show you the front door. Little fun facts about the British Museum. So it is, well, technically it's older than the United States of America. They used to have a station, a train station on the Northern Line called the British Museum, but it closed down eventually because it was very close to the new Holborn station. And they used to have a cat, Mike. Let me show you Mike. He was working here at the British Museum with the security. His main job was to scare the pigeons away. Now, at the British Museum, they also used to have what they called a cabinet of obscenity. I would call it a porn room. It's no longer there today, but at the time, they had gathered all the items that were a little bit naughty, to put all of them in the same room. And so it's an amazing museum, although it's not very British. It's very much international. With oh, what's that actually? What are they? Souvenirs. Welcome to the fortune teller. Choose your number. Choose the original art piece. Your fortune. 10 to 30 pounds only. Hold on, let's see how much it is. Well, it's closed, I can't go to the machine anyway. I don't know what they are. 10 to 30 pounds. I don't know what it is. The sign is written, it's weird. The sign is like handwritten. I can show you, sorry, it's not focusing. Oh, there we go. Why would they have it handwritten? It doesn't look like fortune telling to me, it looks like souvenirs. Oh yeah, here. Magic lucky number card. Very strange. Very strange to have a vending machine in a telephone booth that's closed. What's the point? I didn't particularly want to spend 30 quid in a lucky card anyway, but weird. I don't know how they've got permission to put that in there. Anyway, here we are. So this is the British Museum. It is the place where you have a cursed mummy. Tish, I don't know. I was wondering if they were cards, but it didn't. Maybe. But would you pay 30 quid for a tarot card when you can just open a tarot game at home and pick a card? Weird. Anyway, so there's a cursed mummy at the British Museum. Now, I'm gonna say the mummy. It's not actually a mummy, it's a coffin lid, like a sarcophagi cover. And it is said to be cursed. I'll tell you the full story. According to the British Museum, it's not cursed, it's the unlucky mummy. The story of the cursed mummy, it started in the 1880s in Thebes, in Egypt, when 3 guys bought a coffin lid, and the day after, one of them had an injury, a gun injury, the other one disappeared, and the third one was so scared of the curse that he sold the mummy. And it is said that the 3 subsequent owners, they died in very mysterious circumstances. Then the next one actually sold it to a collector in Streatham in South London. She was very scared because she met a medium that told her, get rid of it, it will kill you. And she then decided to get rid of it, but she wanted to have it photographed first. So she hired a photographer, which would have been fairly expensive at the time. And it is said that when the photograph was developed, it looked like a human soul, whatever that looks like. So then she sold it. The next owner, she did not die, but all her pets did. And it is said that she also, she was so scared that she decided to donate it to the British Museum. And as the porters took it inside, one of them fell downstairs and broke his leg. Now, that's when the story starts to become a bit too much. You're like, what, really? Let me show you a picture of the mummy, because it's still there. It's still inside of the British Museum. It's in the mummy's room. I've actually written the number of the exhibit EA22542, if you wanted to go and see it. And so the mummy, the coffin lid is still there, but the story was published. So that story was in all the newspaper at the time. And the 2 gentlemen that had told the story to the press, they were interesting characters. They were very reputable journalists. Let me remove the mummy. One of them was William Stead. William Stead, we talked about him in some of my tours before. You might remember when we talked about the age of consent. You know, we talked about some ridiculously young sex workers in Victorian times because the age of consent used to be 12 years of age, then eventually 13, and finally in the 1880s it moved up to 16 years of age. Well, that was very much because of a journalist called William Stead. He was a remarkable journalist. We don't know why he would have made up such a story. And the other one was Thomas Douglas Murray. He was a renowned Egyptologist. So we don't know why those two men made up such stories. But there are some Dickens little things. What we do know, it's that they definitely made it up. The story with the so part of the story might have been inspired by a different story. The lady with the pets that all died. That was a different story with a different mummy. So they might have got inspired by that story and then made up a full one. Now, William Stead, he was actually awarded or nominated for a Nobel Prize. So he traveled on a ship to America in 1912. Now, a ship going to America in 1912, that might ring a bell. I am indeed talking about the Titanic. Stead was on the Titanic. He did not survive, sadly. But a lot of people did. And a lot of people told the press that there was a cursed mummy on board, that William Stead had told them that he was bringing a cursed mummy from Britain because the British Museum had donated it to America, which we know now, we know it's rubbish. I mean, all the cargo of the Titanic was recorded and there's absolutely no trace of a mummy, not even a coffin lid. But too late, the story was all over the press. So now a lot of people believe that the cursed mummy striked again and that she claimed 1,500 souls this time in the Titanic. Who knows? I mean, we know the story is all a fraud, but you know, once it's all over the press, bear with me, my shoelaces is all over the place. Actually, let me show you those beautiful boxes as I try to do my shoelaces. I'll just tuck it into my shoe for now so I don't die. There we go. Cool. So, yeah, fascinating story. And it really shows that you shouldn't believe everything you read. Now, let's go down towards Tottenham Court Road. There's another story that happened right here. We talked about it briefly when we talked about Elizabeth Stride, you know, the third Ripper victim, you know, Lucky Lizzie, the one that was not mutilated. Elizabeth Stride, when she was young, before to move to Poplar, she used to live around here. Today it looks very beautiful, of course, today it's very posh. But back in the day, that was part of St. Giles, that was a slum. It was as bad as Whitechapel, really. Some people even called it Little Ireland, because there were a lot of Irish people here. Part of St. Giles was also known as the Rookery. It was really a disgusting slum, overpopulated, extremely poor. The accommodations were so tucked in, so close together. It is said that some criminals used to escape through all the cesspits. So you could go from one house to the next through the cesspits. So when the police was ringing at the door, they'll jump in the cesspit and go to the other building and escape through the back. So it was a proper slum. And there was a terrible accident that happened in the 1870s. It was a tsunami of beer. Yes, you've heard this right. It was a beer tsunami. There used to be a very large brewery here to my left. Today we wouldn't really imagine a brewer around here, but back in the day, again, it was very, very different. And it was the Horseshoe Brewery, Mo, MEUX. They had huge vats inside of beer. Imagine the vat, I think it was 12 feet by 20 feet. I mean, we're talking, those vats were like the size of a very decent size swimming pool. And one day, one of the staff had noticed, so those huge vats, they would have 22 little hoops, I mean little, big metal hoops surrounding the wooden vat. One of the staff had noticed that one of the metal hoops had been damaged. He reported it. They didn't think it was much of a risk. And they left it. I mean, you know, it would take a while to get to order a new hoop to fix it. So they ordered a new one and they left it as it is. And at some point, the vat exploded. But with the pressure, there was a huge, very strong wave of beer that exploded, that destroyed, so the wall of the brewery, so it would have been down here to this side, the wall of the brewery literally collapsed. The wave of beer shattered some of the houses here. I mean, one little girl, I think, was killed being literally ejected out of her own window. Another one in her bed, she drowned, sadly. So the violence of the beer wave was something, astonishing. And that's double sad. There was a family that were having a wake, an Irish wake for a little boy that had passed away. So in a basement, oh look, this is Edward VII. So that's a rather old post box. So yeah, they were having a wake with the little, the dead infant and all the family coming to see the body, as they used to do, you know, in Victorian times. And that was in the basement. The liters and liters of beers went down the basement. They all drowned. So there were 8 victims in total that died that day. And but we're talking 1 million pints of beer. I mean, it's huge. Imagine this huge wave. Now, there are a lot of stories, probably not true, or at least there's no evidence of that. Some say that some people died later on of alcohol poisoning, that, you know, they'll drink some of the beer and they'll fill up their mugs or whatever and drink too much. I mean, it is possible, but that's, as far as we know, not true. It might just have been, my bicycle is still here, so that's a good sign. It might have been a bit exaggerated by some of the journalists later on. But it's interesting that it's a huge local tragedy, and we don't have a memorial or anything, not even a little plaque for them. That's interesting. Anyway, we are now in Tottenham Court Road. Tottenham Court Road has changed quite dramatically since I first moved to London. 19 years ago, I remember there was a big 24-hour kebab down the corner there. It was very, very busy in the middle of the night. We used to go down to a club called the Ghetto, a gay club in Soho Square. It doesn't exist anymore either. A lot of the gay clubs are closing down anyway, the good ones at least. But yeah, it was completely different at the time. It's all been redone because of the new station and the new Lizzie line and everything. And up there, that's Center Point. It's a very, very controversial skyscraper. What happened with Center Point is that in the 60s, the council wanted to, they wanted to do a new junction here, but they didn't really have the money to acquire the land. And there's a private investor that told them, listen, I can buy it for you, and I'll let you build your new junction or whatever you want to build. and on the condition that on the space you don't use for building, then I can build something as high as I'd like. That was actually slightly illegal because, as far as I know, the councils, they're not allowed to accept some donations or gifts in exchange of planning permission. But anyway, that's what happened. That huge thing was built and it remained empty. What happened is the investor, he did not want to rent one floor by one floor. He wanted to rent the full block. So he wanted to wait until he found anyone to rent it. And that took over 10 years. It was such a scandal, in the middle of a living crisis, that there was a charity that was created, a priest that created a local homeless charity, and he called it Center Point. So the same name as the building, just to provoke them, just to annoy them. You can see St. Giles in the back there. That's where Elizabeth Stride got married with her husband, John Stride, the carpenter. Anyway, so yes, Center Point. It is still, that's a bit sad. See, let me turn around, although it's a bit busy. But I'll turn around it's only 9 p.m. and you see there are very few lights on. So it's still mainly emptied now, which is very sad. What happened is they finally, well, I guess you could say a bribe. Not really, because it's more like a dodgy deal. But yeah, what happened is it's been refurbished with some luxury apartments. I mean, some of them cost like 20 millions. It's ridiculous. But a lot of people bought them as an investment. So they don't even live inside anyway. Sadly, that's a shame with London. There are quite a few properties that are built and bought by foreign investors, and they don't even do anything with it. They just invest. And then poor people like me have to go and live further and further away out of town. But anyway. Linda, at the time, I think the point was to do offices, but he couldn't really run them, or not as easily as he wanted. Now it is apartment, luxurious apartment with a spa and saunas and private gyms and all that. Amazing views as well, but very, very expensive now. Now, this is Primark. I'm not here to tell you about Primark. I'm sure, oh sorry, the wind is so strong, it's moving the gimbal. I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what Primark is. It's a very cheap clothing brand. But this was the site of a tea house we mentioned before in my tours. The Lions tea rooms. Well, it used to be a Virgin Megastore before, after that, but do you remember, you know what, I'm gonna go back around the corner, I'll tell you the story there, because it's a bit windy here. Do you remember when we were in Skegness, we talked about Harold Davidson, the prostitute padre, the priest that was a bit dodgy and would go to tea rooms and approach the waiter or the waitress, and be like, hey, you look like so-and-so, famous actress. Oh, I could get you a job in the movies. And then he was being a bit of a perv with them. The one that got killed by a lion in Skegness. Anyway, that's one of the tea rooms where he used to, let's cross because we've got 8 seconds. That's one of the tea rooms where he used to approach those young waitresses to allegedly save them from prostitution. And so the Lion tea rooms, they were called. It was over 4 floors, and it was a very, very popular tea room until I think the 60s they closed. Anyway, the tea rooms, it's not, well, we had Harold Davidson perving in there, but it was also the site of a terrible murder. We had a young man that he was originally from Belgium. His name was Jacques. The full family was from Belgium, but they lived in London. He lived with his family. His dad, Jean-Baptiste Tratzard, their name were. Jean-Baptiste was a shoemaker. They had 6 kids. They lived in South London. Sadly, so we are in the 1930s, and the mother died, and Jacques never, his mental health never recovered. He could not understand why his dad had hired a housekeeper, and then eventually the dad married the housekeeper. Out of the 6 children, 1 little girl suffered from epilepsy, and 1 little boy, he was physically very, very disabled. So the family was coping as they could, but Jacques, his mental health was just very, very bad. He hardly ever spoke to his dad. One day he bought a gun, and his dad decided to take the family to the tea rooms. That's 20th of April, 1935. Hello. So that would have been my birthday, if I had been born. I wasn't born in 1935, but yeah, 20th of April, they went to the tea rooms, and Jacques had decided to eliminate his family. He had the gun with him. He took the gun out. He fired, but nothing happened. And his family, they couldn't believe it. They imagined it was a water gun, a toy. So they told him off. They were like, Jacques, what are you doing? Put the gun down. He put the gun down, but never did they imagine it was a real gun. So he took it back under the table, fiddling with the gun, and eventually he took it back out, and he fired. He knew he had 8 bullets, 2 for his sister Claire, 2 for his brother Hugh, 2 for his dad, and 2 for himself. I'm gonna wait because he fired. Sadly, he killed his sister and his dad. Magically, the little Hugh, the boy that was physically very physically disabled, he had a bullet through his head, but he survived. Imagine the horror in the tea rooms with, probably hundreds of people enjoying their tea, and as he went to fire on himself, nothing came out. And then he saw 2 bullets on the floor. When he was fiddling with the gun that didn't fire straight away, he had accidentally dropped 2 bullets. So he was, people jumped on him and he was arrested. He was tried, he was judged, he was found guilty, but clearly it was his mental health, and he was sent to Broadmoor Asylum. Prison asylum. So when you go to Primark today, most people probably have no idea that it was the site of a horrible mass murder. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions about anything before we go. Thanks for coming tonight. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you on board. And thanks to the gods of the internet for staying with us tonight. I was going to say tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week, we're going back to Stockwell. I'm sure a lot of you that's not for me, Laurie, is it? Let me know if it's for me. If any of you wanted to try to come back to Stockwell with me next Sunday, we're doing that. Some of you might remember last week we had huge signal issues in Stockwell, but I'm pretty sure it's not the normal local signal. We had some issues all over London last week, so we'll try again next weekend. I'll do the walk the other way around anyway. So even if there was a bit of a lack of signal towards the end, at least we'll start in Brixton when I know the signal is good anyway. So we should be all good. Ooh, I'm not sure, Tish. Glad you can make it, Janie. Thanks everyone for coming today. If any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that far into that video after 1 hour and 23 minutes, I think you're good enough to subscribe. If you want to make sure you don't miss out on the lives, you know, it's very easy to miss those lives and to end up watching a replay, which is fun as well, but it's much more fun to be in the live, in the chat with us. So if you wanted to make sure you don't miss the live, what you want to do is subscribe and hit the little notification bell. Now, for those of you that are not in my Facebook group, you might want to join. For those of you that don't know, it's called Natalie My Guide, because not next weekend, but the weekend after, I'm gonna do a little walk that's not gonna be listed as public on my YouTube. It's gonna be unlisted, so I'll share it on Facebook. What happens is I wanna try again to do a walk streaming straight from YouTube, not using any third party, not using Prism, not using Streamlab. Some of you might remember we've done that before. It didn't go down well. It was very pixelated, but it's been at least a year and a half. Google is of course a huge company. They might have improved. I want to do that because there's a lot of updates coming into YouTube in the next few months. Some of them are probably completely useless to me and very much far-fetched in terms of AI. Like I'm gonna be able to, like if I want a monkey on my shoulder right now, I can have an AI monkey on my shoulder. Or if you, you know, now they do auto dubbing. So if you wanna watch me from Hungary, I'll be speaking Hungarian. And in the next few months, they'll be able to adjust my lips. So I'll be speaking Hungarian with nice lips. So those updates are gonna be interesting. But there's another update that basically you'll be able to stream landscape and portrait at the same time. And I'm guessing it's gonna be only when you stream from YouTube itself, not the third parties like Streamlabs or Prism. You might think, oh, I don't like portrait anyway, me neither, but that would give the live a lot of visibility. Because you know you've got people scrolling through the short feed, then they'll be able to end up on my lives. If indeed it works, and if indeed I can stream straight from YouTube and it's not pixelated. So anyway, we're gonna try that in a couple of weeks. It's not gonna be a proper, well-researched tour. I don't wanna do too much research because I don't know if it's gonna work. But I'll be posting it, it's gonna be unlisted. It's gonna be a little walk in my area. Well, there are a few murders in my area, but don't expect a lovely tour, very well researched. It's gonna be a little walk and talk. You can even treat it as ask me anything if you wanted to, and I'll be posting it into my group. So make sure you join the group if you're not in there yet. Cool. I don't see any questions in the chat, so thank you very much for coming tonight, guys. Thank you, Dessa. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Laurie. And oh, it was for Ronnie. Okay, cool. And yes, see you next week in Stockwell, or the week after that for the little walk in my area. If any of you dropped me a tip on different platforms like PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, it's very, very much appreciated as well. Thank you all for your support, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye. Have a good one. Oh, you don't have Facebook? Well, Tanya, I'll put it on the Google Calendar as well. Or yeah, if you are on the Google Calendar, I'll put it there as well. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Bye bye. Have a good one.